gone. Nawala na si Aina. Baka siya, iba kayong kanyang connectivity ang mahina, But anyway, anyone here in the virtual room, could answer my question as to what schemas are and how important are schema, our schema, or we call that as prior knowledge, our existing knowledge of certain events, information or what. How important are this, in the teaching learning process? Yes, Mr. Villarmino. Oy, si Mr. Villarmino andito na. He
Good
was up.
morning, ma'am.
Sige, Mr. Apollo. Good morning to you.
If, for example, ma'am, a student asks you a certain question that is in the topic, however, it is not discussed. So, as a teacher, you need to have a full understanding of your topic, or otherwise backup knowledge or stock knowledge in advance of what your topic is, what are the other related topics. Because you as a teacher, you are a model, so you're supposed to be knowledgeable. Ulaw ba yan nang makakuan pangutanon ka sa dyan mo ingon na kag I'm sorry, I don't know. This has hap this has happened with a few teachers of mine, ma'am, and it was not pretty to look at, and they were embarrassed for quite a bit. So having stock knowledge, they prevents you from experiencing that kind of shame in front of your students. It also uplifts your image among your students that you are a capable teacher. You are a model of society, ma'am. Plus, having also stock knowledge means you have a lot of things you can share with your students to further enrich their knowledge of life and other, among other things, ma'am. That is all, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that answer, Mr. Apollo. Others may also contribute if you want to speak out your thoughts. How important are schemas in facilitating learning?
Permission to talk, ma'am.
How would you translate it to classroom? Yes, Daniel, you are recognized.
So, schema is a way of thinking that you have acquired over a long period of time. You might have been taught it in school or learn it on your own. You
Yes.
might not know that you are using schemas when you do something, but it is happening
Mhm.
nonetheless. Schema is very important. Why? Because it provides us with an organizing structure for our thinking and makes it possible for us to learn new things as we need them. The more schemas we have, the better able we are to understand what is going on around us and how things fit together. And also, schema used to organize many different types of information, such as facts about people, emotional schemas, places, geographical schemas, or object, material schema, or even events, sequential schema, and so on. So, that's all, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So both of you, no, Mr. Apollo and Daniel, are actually pointed out, the importance, how essential our schemas is, in teaching and learning. So how do you think, we're able to strengthen the schemas of our students, especially that we mentioned, na mahalaga talaga ito, it can actually facilitate learning, making use of their schema. So, paano natin matulungan ang mga bata to strengthen their schemas, ma-enrich yung kanilang schemas. So difficult to teach somebody na zero, parang blank slate, Hindi it's so difficult. That's why we have to build, We have to build to strengthen their schemas so that they can relate to the new information that we would like introduce to them. How, Jenny? You are recognized, Jenny. Malingin?
Kuan ma'am, ang schema is kanang ilahang na-acquire nga knowledge kanang belief nga nana sa ila even before ato silang gitudloan. So para maano na siya is mag-undergo og kanang kay bali i-transform nimo ang knowledge barag tudloan nimo siya kanang sakto gyud kay kanang lahi-lahi man gud ang og belief ang isa ka learner, which is mo na iyang kanang kabali prior knowledge ana nga ay kani kuan ang earth is kanang kuan kanang circle, which is kuan niya imuha siyang dungagan og kanang information para maka-create siya og another na sub nga concept, ma'am, knowledge.
Okay. So
Permission
we
to
really
talk,
need to
ma'am.
expose our key. What is that, Daniel?
Ma'am, additional lang po, ma'am, sa imong follow-up question kanina po. How do you think to straighten
Okay.
schema to student? So I think, ma'am,
Mm.
it's very important for students to have a clear schema of what they are studying. Because if there are too many unknowns in their minds, they will not be able to focus on their studies. Also, if they not understand the concept, they might get confused and might even give up on their studies. For example, if you want them to learn how to use computer, then give some practice with it. If you want them to learn how to write a letter, give them some practice writing letters as well as reading and writing them. So that's all, ma'am.
Mm-mm. So exposure talaga, ano? Mas magandang gumagamit tayo ng mga strategies na experiential on their part. Like for example, bringing them to a field trip like that, no? Exposing them to like some events talaga actual, no? Mga vicarious experience, non-vicarious experiences. Pwede yun siya, no? So that they would have hand-on experience, no, on that particular event or uh, idea, for example, maka-experience sila. So you really have to expose them. That's why in the classroom, ngayon naman, meron na tayong talagang, kasi there are things bitaw na first hindi na encounter ng mga bata, no? So we use like real object, showing to them the real object, or di kaya we make use of pictures. Ngayon meron na tayong internet, global na tayo, no? Very easy na, no, to access information. So hindi na masyadong mahirap mag-build up ng talagang rich na schema sa mga bata, no? Ang sa atin lang how to, we are kind of like, no, we are the channel, we're making a channel, no, para ma-strengthen yung schema sa mga bata so that they could relate on the things that we are introducing to them, no? So yun, so you have to prepare, no, activities in the classroom that would help them improve, no, or strengthen their schemas. Thank you for your sharing, no, for the ideas, Apollo, Jenny, and Daniel. Let us continue with our next presenter.
Good morning. I am audible.
Yes, you
Yes,
are.
you are.
I think. Cumulative learning theory. Gestalt psychology. A theory that looks at the human mind and behavior as a whole. When trying to make sense of the world around us, Gestalt psychology suggests that we do not simply focus on every small component. Gestalt psychology is a branch of psychology concerned with human perception. Psychologists from this school of thought theorize and describe how people organize and interpret visual stimuli. The statement, "the whole is greater than the sum of its parts," is a well-known saying used to explain some of the fundamental Gestalt concepts and principles. People interpret individual species of visual information, such as shapes and symbols, in relation to another based on how they are arranged or configured according to Gestalt theory. Next slide, please. Max Wertheimer, an Austro-Hungarian psychologist known for his book Productive Thinking and for conceiving the phenomenon as part of his work in Gestalt psychology. Wolfgang Kohler, a German psychologist and phenomenologist who, like Max Wertheimer and Kurt Kafka, contributed to the creation of Gestalt psychology. Kurt Kafka is a German psychologist and professor. These three suggested that learners do not just collect information as is, but they actively process and restructure data in order to understand it. Next slide, please. Gestalt principles are the law of proximity, law of similarity, law of closure, law of good construction, law of good pregnancy, and law of figure or ground. Next slide, please. Law of proximity, which is also known as grouping or the grouping principle. According to this principle, objects that are closer together are often perceived as belonging together as a group. The lines that in figure 1, the lines that are closer together can be perceived as columns. Since the line in figure 1 are closer together, people often view them as columns. In figure number 2, these are often viewed as a series of lines. In contrast, the lines in figure 2 are often viewed simply as a series of lines since they are not grouped in a way that affects perceptions. Next slide, please. Law of similarity. Elements that look similar will be perceived as part of the same form. If there were 5 dogs of all different breeds and 5 cats of different breeds, then we would group them as cats and dogs. If proximity is due to position, then the gestal principle of similarity is how we piece information together by how similar objects are. Next slide, please. Law of closure. We tend to fill the gaps or close the figures we perceive. For example, is the WWF incomplete logo or design. We can find some unfilled gap in the logo of WWF. For instance, in the logo of WWF, there is an image of a panda, and it has something missing spaces on its back and head. It is probably where the white fur of the panda would be. However, we are well aware of the shape and color of the panda, and so we automatically and subconsciously fill the missing gaps. Next slide, please. Law of good construction. Individuals have the tendency to continue contours whatever the elements of the pattern establish an implied direction. For example is the Amazon. The principle of continuity states that whenever our eyes begin to follow something, they will continue to travel in that direction until they encounter another object. The eyes create momentum as they are compelled to move through one object to another. In the logo of Amazon, there is an arrow starting from A and ending at Z, which depicts that Amazon has everything from A to Z. Next slide, please. Law of good pregnancy. Reality is often organized or reduced to the point form. For example is Olympic logo. Olympic logo, it expresses the activity of the Olympic movement and represents the union of the 5 continents and the meeting of athletes from throughout the world at the Olympic Games. The word pregnancy is a German term meaning good figure. The law of pregnancy is also referred to as the law of good figure or the law of simplicity. This principle states that humans naturally perceive objects in the simplest form. Next slide, please. Law of figure or ground. We tend to pay attention and perceive things in the foreground first. For example is the multi-stability image. The above logo for Hope for American Children initiative simultaneously depict the map of African and the warning salutes of an adult and a child. The human eye can differentiate an object from surrounding. We perceive certain objects as being in the background. Next slide, please. Gagne's condition of learning. Robert M. Gagne was an American educational psychologist best known for his conditions of learning. He pioneered the science of instruction during World War II when he worked with the Army Air Corps training pilot. In this theory, Gagne specified several different types of or levels of learning He stressed that different internal and external conditions are needed for each type of learning. Next slide, please. There are 5 categories of learning outcomes and its conditions of learning. The first category is the intellectual skills. Create individual competence and ability to respond to stimuli. For example, is memorizing that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a use of knowledge as a skill. However, knowing that 2 of an object plus 2 of an object equals 4 of an object is a comprehension or the simple understanding what the parts of formula mean. Knowledge is defined as the ability to memorize and reproduce information. Comprehension and the knowledge is the ability to understand what memorized information means. The skills should be built up in increment levels and at a speed with which all learners can cope. How do we think and understand? Looking at the specific intellectual skills that define our thought processes and ideas can answer that question and give insight into human mind. Intellectual skills are defined as the methods an individual can use to evaluate or organize information and data. Next slide, please. The second one is the cognitive strategies. Employing personal ways to guide learning. There are 5 primary cognitive skills. These are reading, learning, remembering, logical reasoning, and paying attention. Each of these can be utilized in a way that helps us become better at learning new skills and developing ourselves. Your cognitive abilities help you process new information by taking that information and distributing it into appropriate areas in your brain. When you need that information later, your brain also uses cognitive skills to retrieve and use that information by developing your cognitive skills. You help your brain complete this process more quickly and efficiently, and you ensure that you understand effectively process and that new information. Cognitive strategies provides information feedback as to the creativity or originality of the strategy outcome. Next slide, please. Next is verbal information, stating previously learned material such as facts, concepts, and procedure. It provides cues for effective recall and generalization of information. Verbal communication skills include more than just talking. It encompasses both how you deliver messages and how you receive them. Next slide, please. Motor skills. Executing performances involving the use of muscles. It furnishes immediate feedback as to the accuracy of performance. For example, is sitting, crawling, running, and jumping. Even the first time a baby lifts its head is an example of a motor skill. Next slide, please. Attitude. Choosing personal actions based on internal states of understanding and feeling. For example, if the patient or trainee is needy, the therapist or trainer is self-sufficient, and the therapist's job is to frustrate the manipulation of the needy patient. Attitude establishes an expectancy of success associated with desired attitude. Robert Gagne, next slide please. Okay. An educational psychologist who created a 9-steps process called the events of instructions. Gagne's 9 events of instruction model helps trainer, educators, and instructional designers structure Designers structure their training sessions. The model is a systematic process that helps them develop strategies and create activities for instructional classes. The 9 events provide a framework for an effective learning processes. So the first instructional event is gaining attention. So in the slide, there are techniques for gaining learners' attention. In gaining attention, you begin the learner's learning session by gaining attention of the learners. Ensure the learners are motivated to learn and participate in activities by presenting a stimulus to gain their attention. This can be accomplished by presenting the learners with an introductory activity that engages the learners. Next slide, please. The second is informing learners of the objective. After gaining their attention, inform the learners of the learning objectives to help them understand what they will be learning during the session. State what the learners will be able to use the knowledge in the future. This allows the learner to organize their thoughts on what they will learn and help place them in a proper mindset. Next slide, please. Stimulate recall of prior knowledge. Help the learners make sense of the new information by relating it to something they have already know or something they have already experienced. To accomplish this present the learner with an experience or cue that stimulates their prior knowledge. Make connections not between what they are learning and their previous learning. When people learn something new, it is best to correlate the new information with related information or topics they have learned in the past. Next slide, please. Fourth instructional event, presenting the materials. There are ways to present sessions. Context include, it is stated in the slide. So present the learner with with the new information using learning strategies to provide effective and efficient instruction. Organize and chunk context in a meaningful way. Provide explanations after demonstrations. Next slide, please. Fifth is providing learning material. Offer the learner guidance by providing coaching on how to learn new skill. Give examples and advice of strategies to aid them in the learning content and of resources available to them. Also provide guidance using cues, hints, and or prompts to help them understand and remember they are learning. The sixth is elicit performance. Let the learner do something with a newly acquired behavior, skills, or knowledge. Provide them with practice activities to activate the learning process. This activity allows the learners to internalize the new information and to ensure correct understanding and application of knowledge concepts. Next slide, please. Seventh is provide feedback. After the learner attempts to demonstrate their knowledge, provide immediate feedback of learners' performance to assess and facilitate learning. This is also a good time to reinforce any important points. This stage helps reinforcement of a correct answer, give guidance as to the degree of correctness of the task, and or provides corrective feedback if therefore is incorrect. Next slide, please. 8 is assess performance. In order to evaluate the effectiveness of the instructional events, administer a test the learner to determine if the expected learning outcomes have been achieved. Performance should be based on previously stated objectives. Next slide, please. The ninth is enhance retention and transfer. Give the learner resources that enhance retention and transfer of knowledge so that they are able to internalize the new knowledge and enhance his or her expertise. Repeated practice with effective feedback is the best way to ensure that people retain information and use it effectively. Each step addresses a form of communication. Each step addresses a form of communication that supports the learning process. When each step addresses is completed, learners are much more likely to be engaged and to retain the information or skills that they are being taught. The steps essentially give designers an outline or prototype to use prior or to performing teaching and training activities. And that would be all. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you also, Donna. Miss Detalo, for that comprehensive presentation. I am just glad that you're able naman to point out some classroom implications in your presentation. So let us just remember the idea of cumulative learning theory, yung Gestalt psychology and the principles, and how are these principles translate into the classroom, like the law of proximity. How would you translate that one sa classroom setting, law of similarity, and the rest of the Gestalt principles. And then yung kay GEDMI naman na conditions of learning, very important to know yung kanyang non-instructional events. Kasi ito yung flow, this is the flow of the lesson that we conduct in the classroom. We always start with gaining attention, di ba? We start with motivation. We try to heighten the interests of our students by using some motivational techniques that's gaining attention. Then informing learners of the objectives, ano bang objective natin for today or for today. Then recalling of the prior knowledge or the schema, the next. Then presenting the material, and this is the lesson for the day, the new lesson, the subject matter. And then you guide the students towards the learning, the process of learning. So you have to think about some effective strategies na makadevelop ka nung concept sa mga bata ay makadevelop ng concept. Okay, then feedback naman, this is like application of the concept learned, and then assessment, the evaluation, and then of course enhanced retention and transfer. Meaning to say, may mga follow-up tayo. That's why we give assignments, di ba? Assignments to follow up the lesson that they learned from our actual teaching. Okay, so thank you for that sharing. Hindi na ako, I think mag-move on na tayo sa next presenter kasi dalawa pa kayo, and then there are still 6 people who would present. So thank you for that, Miss Donna. If we still have time at the end of all the presentation, then we could go back to you and ask you some questions that we would like to be clarified. Okay? Sige.
Okay, ma'am.
All right. So I think we have to move on to the next.
Thank you, ma'am. Good day, everyone. Today, my report is all about the meaningful learning theory by David Ausubel. David Ausubel, an American psychologist born in Brooklyn, New York, influenced by the work of Jean Piaget. His principal interests in psychiatry have been general psychopathology, drug addiction, and forensic psychiatry. Next slide, please. During meaningful learning, the person subsumes or organizes and incorporates new knowledge into old knowledge. According to Ausubel, the essence of learning is structured hierarchically when it is absorbed into the learner's cognitive system from the old knowledge to the new one. Subsumption theory suggests that our mind has a way to subsume information in a hierarchical or categorical manner if the new information is lined, incorporated with prior knowledge or familiar patterns. The current structure serves as a framework within which a new knowledge is connected to the prior information of ideas in the person's cognitive system in a hierarchical order. As a result, prior knowledge is given absolute importance, since the prior knowledge can link it to the new knowledge that have been gathered. Teachers are encouraged to teach prior knowledge first rather than a new information to help information subsume. When one encounters wholly fresh and unfamiliar content, rote learning takes place rather than meaningful learning. That's why teachers are encouraged to teach the basics first before the complex learning. Advanced organizers provide concepts and principles to the student directly in an organized format. And organizers are a cognitive instructional method used to increase the retention and recall of new knowledge that is supplied prior to learning, and also that the learner can use to organize and comprehend new incoming information. The strategy of advanced organizers basically to means classify, categorize, arrange information as you proceed to the next complex level. Organizers are collections of information provided at a greater level of complexity, generalization, and inclusion. These organizers are introduced prior to learning and chosen for their ability to explain, integrate, and connect the content that comes before it. Next slide, please. Principles. The most general ideas of a subject should be presented first and then progressively differentiated in terms of detail and specificity. The overall notion is that the idea is wide, but after the broad explanation, it will proceed into a specific discussion so that the general details may be matched up and realized from prior information to newfound information. It is merely broadening the earlier information, and then, in order for it to be much more understandable, we must explain and provide the full facts of that specific topic. Instructional materials should attempt to integrate new material with previously presented information through comparison and cross-referencing of the new old ideas. Through comparing and cross-referencing of new and old ideas, instructional materials should seek to incorporate new content with previously taught information. Next slide, please. Focus of Osibel's theory. The most important factor influencing learning is the quantity, clarity, and organization of the learner's present knowledge. The core idea of Osibel's theory is that gaining new knowledge is based on prior knowledge. In other words, knowledge construction begins with our observing and recognition of situations and objects using concepts we already have. We learn by developing and expanding a linkage of concepts. The way to strengthen the students' cognitive structure is by using advanced organizers that allow students to already have a bird's eye view or to see the big picture of the topic to be learned even before going to details. Teachers could manage this by offering a quick introduction to the organization of the information that will be given. This would allow the student to begin with a big picture of the approaching topic and connect new ideas, concepts, and knowledge to pre-existing theoretical concepts of the subject. Subsumption is a process by which new material is related to or relevant ideas and the existing cognitive structure. Subsumption is a primary process that occurs in the learner's brain, in which new knowledge is connected to relative ideas that are already present in the current cognitive structure. Next slide, please. Process meaningful learning. Derivative subsumption, new material or relationships can be derived from the existing structure. When you add new subjects to the existing cognitive structures, you link them to previously known concepts. When you add additional details to what you already know, generally a higher idea. Correlative subsumption, new material is an extension or elaboration of what is already known. It is refers to the development, extension, or transformation of previously learned thoughts or ideas through the incorporation of new ideas. Superordinate learning, an individual is able to give a lot of examples of the concept but does not know the concept itself until it is taught. This situation represents a circumstances in which the new information obtained is a concept that relates known example of a concept. Suppose I was familiar what maples, oaks, apple trees, and so on, but had no idea that these are all examples of shrubs and trees until I was educated. Combinatorial learning. The first three learning processes all involve new information that attaches to hierarchy at a level that is either below or above previously acquired knowledge. Combinatorial learning, on the other hand, explains a process in which a new thought is formed from a thought that is neither higher nor lower in the hierarchy, but is at the same level. This is an example of learning by comparison. Advanced organizer. Advanced organizers are used to relate prior information to new concepts. They are part of possible subsumption theory that contends that meaningful learning and permanent retention of materials is a function of stability of existing anchoring ideas. Organizers are collections of information provided at a greater level of abstraction, generality, and inclusion. These organizers are introduced prior to learning and are chosen for their usefulness for explaining, integrating, and interpreting the material that comes before it. Next slide, please. Types of advanced organizers. Expository teaching presents several encompassing generalization where detailed contents will be added. A teaching approach in which the teacher gives the subject matter rules to pupils and provides instances to demonstrate the rules. Narrative presents the new information in the form of a story to students. Stories heard, stories told, and stories acknowledged. Hearing stories implies reception. Those stories can come from anywhere, but they must be received by the students, and the learner must then make sense of them. Skimming, done by looking over the new material to gain a basic overview. Skimming is the process of reading quickly in order to acquire a general summary of the subject. Scanning is the process of reading quickly in order to identify certain details. Graphic organizer, visuals to set up or outline the new information. This includes pictographs, descriptive patterns, concept patterns, and concept maps. Are a useful learning tool for students at all ages for organizing, clarifying, or simplifying difficult information. They assist students in developing comprehension through a study of the relationship between concepts. Possible theories concerned with how individuals learn large amounts of meaningful materials from verbal to textual representation in a school setting as opposed to theories developed based on experimental setting. Therefore, learning is based upon the kinds of superordinate, representational, and combinatorial process that occur during presentation of information. It has a thought that the previous learning can be added to the new learning. It is an unending process of building hierarchy. That's all, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So, naintindihan ba natin yung subsumption theory? No? Subsumption theory of David Ausubel. Ano ba ibig sabihin niya ng subsumption theory? It suggests that our mind has a way, to subsume information in a hierarchical or categorical manner. No, so ibig sabihin if the new information daw is lined up or incorporated with the prior knowledge, so magiging familiar yung pattern, sabi ni Ausubel. So how is that relate also to the schema? No, pinpoint out niya yung kahalagan ng schema dito sa subsumption. Bakit kaya? Why is schema also being pointed out, as one important factor, in this theory of subsumption? are meaningful? Miss May.
Kuan man ma'am, a scam is prior knowledge also, so subsumption is also for prior knowledge. So they are connected with each other po.
How are they how are they connected? How do
Um,
you how do you
be-
explain that one? I know when it comes to uh, learning, teaching and learning.
First, the prior knowledge is um, basic knowledge, ma'am. So, siguro, pareha sila sa assumption kay kung ang scam is prior knowledge, dapat may prior knowledge before to complexity. So, ang subsumption sa akong na learn is prior knowledge also siya, basic learning like observing, experience nga your prior knowledge is naka-line up hierarchically through the process, which is prior knowledge to the complexity.
Mm-hmm. So what is the role, no? So kasi na-mention also yung advanced organizer, no? Sa subsumption. So what do you think is the role, no, of this graphic organizer? No, when we talk about subsumption theory, why is advanced organizer, graphic organizer is being mentioned, no? Very important thing ito when we talk about meaningful learning theory. Do you know what are graphic organizers? Of course you do. People, di ba? Alam natin yung mga graphic organizers, yung mga concept web, yung mga ano pang mga graphic organizers na ito, and why is it that this is talaga specially mentioned as one of the features of meaningful learning theory or the subsumption theory? Bakit kaya? Anyone from the group here in the virtual room? Yeah, mga advanced organizers, and you even like mentioned, types of advanced organizers. Is there in your slide, no, the types of advanced organizer? Mayroong for expository teaching, for narrative, for skimming, no, and then we also have the graphic organizers. Ayan, it says there yung expository teaching when you present several encompassing generalization, pwede yan siya, the narratives, no, and so on and so forth. So, why do you think, no, mahalaga yung advanced organizer, when we talk about this theory on subsumption? May Princess?
I think, ma'am, it is important kay kuan man, to clarify or to simplify the difficult information mo nang gigamit nato ang graphic organizers.
Di ba nung kayo ay kahit na ngayon, no, ngayon nasa college kayo, pero siguro doon sa senior high school, no, one of the learning materials that actually used, no, by your professor, by your teachers, no, are the graphic organizers. Ano bang intention ng teacher, no, na gumagamit siya ng graphic organizer? Are the students being helped, no, in the understanding or towards the understanding of the concept, for example, through the graphic organizer? All right. Si Gleason Lim has raised a hand. Gleason?
Well, ma'am, it incorporates new knowledge into old knowledge, ma'am.
So new knowledge,
Incorporates new knowledge into old knowledge, ma'am.
old knowledge being incorporated with the new knowledge, or new knowledge being incorporated with the old knowledge through the use of the graphic organizer. Is that what you mean, Gleason?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yung iba, thank you for that. Yung iba, teka ha, may sumulat dito sa ating ano. All right, according to Gleason, if you incorporate new knowledge into old knowledge, okay, thank you for that answer. we have here from Ms. Magtole, students' cognitive structure can be strengthened through the use of the graphic organizer that would allow students to see the big picture of the topic to be learned even before going into detail. You are right, ano? Sometimes we do this when we present a graphic organizer. Kaya nga sinasabing if students are able to complete a graphic organizer, and then nakita mo, naintindihan niya, correctly, nagawa niya yung graphic organizer according to the concepts or to the information being presented, then you can tell na nasabtan niya ang lesson, nasabtan niya ang concept. And then Arang also said, graphic organized structure structuralizes the lesson. Okay? Ano pa? Ano pa kaya? We can use graphic organizer to relate prior information to new concepts. Tama yan? Yes, Miss Bilonio?
Um,
Mr. Bilonio, sorry.
dagdag lang
Yes.
ako, dagdag lang ako sa graphic organizer na answer ni Trisel is to organize, structuralize the lesson. So some lessons are hard to understand, ma'am. Labo na ng daghag ideas and maglisod o comprehend ang students kung asa ang main idea or main lesson jud sa isa ka topic. So mag-help ang graphic organizer to break down the main ideas to sub ideas so that ma-comprehend o absorb sa learners ang lesson.
Okay, thank you. Correct, no? Pag nag-present tayo ng graphic organizer sa mga bata, pwede namang hindi lahat ng information ay ipasok mo doon. No, you can just fill in some of the boxes, no, in the graphic organizer with some information, and then they can complete, themselves. Pwede yan siya, no? Para malaman natin, no, we could determine whether they really understand, no, the lesson or not. Okay, so thank you for your responses, guys. Maraming salamat. We can proceed to the next one. Okay. Meaningful Learning Theory by Osebel. Then the next natin is the Discovery Learning Theory. Very popular. Sige, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible po?
Yes, you are.
So, as you can see in the screen, the theory that I will introduce to you is the Discovery Learning Theory. So, the proponent of Discovery Learning Theory is Jerome Bruner. So, he is an American psychologist who made significant contributions to human cognitive psychology and cognitive learning theory in educational psychology. Bruner was a senior research fellow at the New York University School of Law. So Bruner was born on October 1, 1915 and died June 5, 2016. So one fact about Bruner is he was born blind due to cataracts, and he had an operation at the age of 2 to restore his vision. So what is discovery learning? Discovery learning is a learning method that encourages students to ask questions and formulate their own tentative answers and to deduce general principles from practical examples or experiences. Discovery learning is a learning situation in which the principal context of what is to be learned is not given but must be independently discovered by the student. It is based on the idea that learning is an active process in which learners construct new ideas or concepts based upon their current or past knowledge. So students interact with the world by exploring and manipulating objects and performing experiments. So Brunner believed that students more likely to remember concepts and knowledge that they have discovered on their own. So there are 4 features of Brunner's theory of instruction. Number one is predisposition to learn. So this feature specifically states the experiences which move the learner toward a love of learning in general or of learning something in particular. Motivational, cultural, and personal factors contribute to this. Brunner emphasized social factors and early teachers and parents' influence on this. He believed learning and problem solving emerge out of exploration. Part of the task of a teacher is to maintain and direct a child's spontaneous explorations. So, Brunner felt that experiences should be designed that will help the students be willing and able to learn. Number two, structure of knowledge. It is possible to structure knowledge in a way that enables the learner to most readily grasp the information. This is a relative feature as there are many ways to construct a body of knowledge and many preferences among learners. Brunner offered considerable detail about structuring knowledge. So, the structure of knowledge, the ways in which a body of knowledge can be structured so that it can be most readily grasped by the learner. So, there is a structure of knowledge is naka-structure na siya para mas dali siya masabtan sa mga students. Number three, modes of representation. So there are three modes of representation: visual, words, symbols, or inactive, iconic, and symbolic. So ang modes of representation are the way in which the information or knowledge are stored and encoded in memory. So ang inactive is learned through movement or actions. So inactive representation of knowledge through actions. So sa inactive stage, it involves the encoding and storage of information. There is a direct manipulation of things without any internal representation of objects. In iconic stage, which is the second stage, it is learned through visual images or icons. This appears from 1 to 6 years old. Iconic stage involves internal representation of external objects, usually in the form of a mental image or icon. Example is a child drawing of an image of a tree, or thinking of an image of a tree would be representation of this stage. Number three, symbolic stage. Symbolic stage is learned through abstract symbols. The symbolic stage is from 7 years old and up. Symbolic stage is when information is stored in the form of a code or symbol, such as language. Number four, effective sequencing. No, no one sequencing will fit every learner, but in general, increasing difficulty. Sequencing or lack of it can make learning easier or more difficult. According to Brunner, instruction should lead the learner through the content in order to increase the student's ability to grasp or understand, transform, and transfer what is learned. Sequencing should move from inactive to iconic to symbolic. So na siya ay pagkakasunod-sunod ang learning. However, this sequence will be dependent on the student's symbolic system and learning style. So wala may sequencing ang will fit every learner, pero in general ang maka-help ang effective ang sequencing para mas mapadali ang kanang learning or makasabot ang mga students. So Brunner suggested a system of coding in which people form a hierarchical arrangement of related categories. Categories are rules that specify four things about objects. Number one is criterial attributes. So criterial attributes required characteristics for inclusion of an object in a category. For example, sa criterial attributes is for an object to be included in the category car, It must have an engine, four wheels, and be a possible means of transportation. Number two, the second rule prescribes how the criterial attributes are combined. Number three, the third rule assignees weight to various properties. So examples sa third sa third one is it could be a car even if a tire was missing. And if it was used for hauling cargo, it would be shifted to a different category of truck or perhaps a van. Number four, the fourth rule sets acceptance limits on attributes. So some attributes can vary widely, such as color. Others are fixed. For example, is a vehicle without an engine is not a car. Likewise, a vehicle with only two wheels could not be included in car. So, muna siya ang um, categories. So there are three kinds of categories. Number one is identity categories. Identity categories are categories that include objects based on their attributes or features. Second one is equivalent categories. So equivalent categories provide rules for combining categories. Equivalence can be determined by effective criteria, which objects equivalent by emotional reactions, functional criteria based on related functions. Number three, coding systems. So coding systems are categories served to recognize sensory input. They are major organizational variables in higher cognitive functioning. So Brunner's theories introduced the idea that people interpret the world largely in terms of similarity and differences. There is a significant contribution to how individuals construct their unique models of the world. So the last is application. So to achieve effective instruction, it must be Brunner emphasized these four characteristics to effective instructions. Number one is personalized. Instructions should relate the learner's predisposition and facilitate interest towards learning. So if ang instruction is personalized, ang students is ma-engage sila kay makarelate man sila sa kung unsa ang ginatudlo sa ilaha. Number two is content structure or ang pagkakahanay or arrangement. Content structure is that content should be structured so it can be most easily grasped by the learner. Number three, sequencing. Sequencing is an important aspect for presentation of materials. So, pare atong ganihan, na dapat correct sequencing from the easy hangtod sa magsugod sa easy hangtod sa lisod-lisod na siya para effective ang learning. Number four, reinforcement. So these are rewards and punishment that should be selected and paced appropriately. So in general, discovery learning, ang key concept sa discovery learning is to encourage learners to build on past experiences and knowledge, to use their intuition and imagination and search for new information to discover new ideas. So discovery learning is a constructivist theory that is based on the idea that students construct their own understanding and knowledge through experiencing and reflecting on those experiences. So in this theory, learners construct new ideas or concepts based on their past or current knowledge. So the importance of discovery learning is that this method, which is learning through discovery, enables the students to exercise higher level thinking skills. Discovery learning focuses on students' engagement on situations and to explore things on their own. This helps the students to learn how to this helps the students how to learn, and the knowledge are easily remembered kay sila man ang naka-discover sa learning. It is much easier nga ma-remember nila ang unsa ilahang natun-an. So the classroom application of this theory are, for example, giving tasks such as doing reflections, case study, puzzles, experiments, and role playing. So as a teacher, in the discovery learning, the teacher's role is to ensure that students have basic knowledge, which is writing and reading. The teacher's roles also to give guided tasks to show how it should be done, and to give feedback or offer suggestions so that they will be guided on what to do, and students more likely to understand and remember the concepts that they had discovered in the course of their own exploration. That's all, ma'am.
Okay. Now, if you are to choose, no, among the theories, would you be using or applying this discovery learning in your classroom? Do you think this is one of the best theories that you could like recommend to teachers?
For me, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Why? What's the main feature of discovery learning that you like best?
Because discovery learning is kanang nag-allow siya sa students nga mag-build on their past experience and knowledge, and it also it also help them to exercise higher level of thinking skills and to explore things on their own. Kay if ang student manggod, for me, ma'am, if they discover or learn kanang on their own, mas dali nila kanang ma-remember or dili nila dali malimtan ang ilahang
That is true.
natun-an.
That is true. That is one of the features actually of discovery learning. No, sabi ni Jerome Bruner that things that are discovered or concepts that are discovered by students can stay, no, in their long-term memory kasi they are the ones who really constructed that idea, no, rather than the spoon feeding or the listening to lectures. Pero pag sila personally ang naka-discover, no, naka-create, naka-construct, no, on that specific knowledge, it would stay, no, in their memory, no, for a long period of time. So that's one positive features actually of discovery learning. And mayroon tayong mga pwedeng gawin, di ba? Like yung mga yung i-categorize or classifying things, discovery man yan siya. Looking at the pictures, for example, paano ba natin i-classify it according to color, according to size, no? Or according to features, no? Pwede naman yung according to the attributes, ano, of that particular object, and then they can come up with a concept na these objects are grouped of what, no? So sila na magka-classify, and it's discovery. No, it's not being fed, no, by the teacher. It's the students, that the learners are actually the ones constructing that idea through, of course, the activities that you are introducing to them. Okay, I see the hands of Mr. Villarmino. However, we have, no, in the interest of time, at mayroon pa tayong, just save your question, your reaction pala, Mr. Villarmino, no, when all are done, no, in presenting. Okay, so shall we now move on to our next? Thank you for your concise, brief but concise, no, presentation, Ms. Paula. Shall we listen now to the next one?
Good morning, everyone. I am audible.
Yes,
Yes,
you are.
Han.
Okay, thank you. My report is about situated learning theory. Jean Leave. She is a social anthropologist theorized learning as changing participation in ongoing changing practice. Her life work challenges conventional theories of learner and education. She completed her doctorate in social anthropology at Harvard University in 1968. Also, she was born in 1939 and known for communities of practice, legitimate peripheral participation, situated learning. So, what is situated learning? It is an instructional approach developed by Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger in the early 90s and allows the work of Dewey, Vygotsky, and others who claims that students are more inclined to learn by actively participating in the learning experiences. So ang situated learning theory kay nag-describe siya on how people gain professional abilities o nag-cooperate sa education study how valid the peripheral involvement leads to the membership of community of practice. And it involves students in corporate activities where they are challenged to use their critical thinking and kinesthetic abilities. And also, it provides real context that reflects the way that knowledge will be used in real life. Next, my Um, example of situated learning activity. Field trips where students actively participate in unfamiliar environment, cooperate education and internship experiences in which students are immersed and physically active in an actual work environment. So this example illustrates that students are actively involved in addressing the real world's problem as the practice implies, the student is situated in the learning experience and the knowledge acquisition becomes a part of the learning activity. Its context and the culture in which it is developed and used. Students form or construct their own knowledge from experiences they bring to the learning situation, and the success of situated learning experiences relies on social interaction and kinesthetic activity. Traditional versus situated. Ang traditional is it occurs from abstract out of context experiences such as koan literatures and books, while the sit- situated it suggests that learnings take place through the relationships between people and connecting prior knowledge with authentic, informal, and often unintended contextual learning. Next, my how to include it in the classroom. Teacher turns from transmitted to facilitator of learning by tracking progress, assessing products produced by learners, building collaborative learning environments, and encouraging reflection. So the teacher will guide and assess the student in learning for themselves. Assess students through discussion, reflection, evaluation, and validation of the community's perspective. And the act of writing in a weblog or blogging can go a long way toward teaching skills such as research, organizations, and the synthesis of ideas. Also, social networks like Facebook and Twitter allows learners, once they move beyond the personal connections, to embrace a community where they can learn from each other. So, what is the importance of situated learning? It allows the students to learn naturally as a result of social behavior. The computer application acts as a guide while the students learn naturally from their own experiences. As always, situated learning accelerates a student's learning process and ability. So ang students learning nag-engage sa students to enjoy learning circumstances where they solve problems while actively participating in an activity. These challenges should include a social network that is modeled by real life scenarios. Finally, students would be encouraged to use their past knowledge and challenge others in their community through the contextual learning experiences. Um, do you believe that this situated learning theory is helpful for the students? Because I believe that learning that situated learning is a must to to imply to the classrooms because it is important. And what is the application of situated learning? Through situated learning, students will be able to learn the skills and able to be accurately use the skills they have learned. Situated learning allows students to gain experience through doing in some ways, and from this experience, they are able to be productive in their lives after they learn it. That's all.
Mhm. Alright, so tandaan lang natin yung situated learning is parang it's a theory ano that does not follow the old way, the traditional way of teaching. Kasi yung traditional way natin before, it's about lecturing, listening to lecture, demonstration, like that, books, no? Naka-focus doon sa mga libro. Ang situated naman na iba siya, no? Parang off-classroom activities like if you conduct field trip, no? Mga experiential lahat ng mga yan, laboratory, no? Ito ang pino-point out sinusuggest sa atin, nire-recommend sa atin ng theorist na ito na si Jen Lavey, no? Yung situated learning theory. Okay, so proceed na tayo kasi we don't have time anymore. I still have 3 people left. Later on, if we have some few minutes, I save niyo lang yung mga questions at mga comments ninyo. Sige, let's continue with cognitive flexibility. Tuloy-tuloy na yung ating presentation na,
Good morning. Am I audible?
Good morning.
So,
Yes, still
You
loud.
are.
so my topic is about cognitive flexibility and metacognition. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to appropriately and efficiently adjust one's behavior according to a changing environment. Spiro, the proponent of cognitive flexibility theory, offers a constructivist theory of learning and instruction that emphasizes the need to treat complex, ill-structured knowledge domains differently from simple, well-structured domains. So, the most helpful way to explain cognitive flexibility is using analogy. Transfer of learning and skills beyond initial learning situation. Furthermore, this stresses the importance of constructed knowledge. Next, are the following. First, knowledge is context dependent. Knowledge cannot be perceived out of context. It is the context that allows learners to see any possible relationships between various components of the subject matter presented. In addition, learning activities in any educational setting should be able to provide several different representations of the same instructional objectives in different contexts. Second, knowledge cannot be simplified. Instructional materials to be used must not oversimplify a topic, neither in terms of content according to which learners are actively engaged in the learning process and they are responsible for their own learning. Fourth, knowledge is interconnected. In order for the learner to grasp what is being taught, the knowledge sources that are used should be interconnected rather than separated and compartmentalized. Metacognition theory is a theory of knowledge that is interested in how humans can actively monitor and regulate their own thought processes. It came from the root word meta, means beyond, and cognition means thinking, authored by John H. Flavel. Next, my please. John H. Flavel, born on August 9, 1928 in Rutland, Massachusetts, an American developmental psychologist specializing in children's cognitive development. So, types of metacognitive knowledge. First, declarative knowledge, also known as the person knowledge. This type of metacognitive knowledge is not always accurate as an individual's self-assessment can easily be reliable. Second, descriptive knowledge. Third, strategy knowledge, also known as conditional knowledge. One's ability to use strategies is to learn information. Next, my metacognitive regulation is how we control our thinking to facilitate our learning. For example, students with effective metacognitive regulation skills can select appropriate learning strategies for a task and modify their approaches based on outcome. So metacognitive regulation is important because it increases student motivation because students feel more in control of their own learning. Regulation is used to describe how individuals monitor and assess their knowledge. This includes knowing how and when to use certain skills and helps individuals to control their learning. Metacognitive strategies refers to methods used to help students understand the way they learn. In other words, it means processes designed for students to think about their thinking, and it is important to learners because it can empower students to think about their own thinking. First is think aloud. It helps students to consciously monitor and reflect upon what they are learning. Example for this strategy is when teachers read a story or problem out loud and periodically stop to verbalize their thoughts. Organizational tools. Both students and teachers can benefit inside and out of school from organizational tools like calendars, presentation, templates, and note-taking apps. Explicit teacher modeling. So the purpose of explicit teacher modeling is to provide students with clear, multisensory model of a skill or concept. Teacher both describes and models the math skill concept. Next is reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the ability to process text, understand its meaning, and to integrate with that with what the reader already knows. Cognitive and metacognitive factors refers to thought processes involved in learning, as well as the strategies students use to learn and their reflections about their thought processes. First, the nature of the learning process. Learning is an active social process. Example for this is a child learns to write by practicing writing. Second, construction of knowledge is an active process that happens through individual or social engagement. For example, students might read a description of a historical period and infer why people who lived then behaved the way they did. Third, strategic thinking is a mental or thinking process applied by an individual in the context of achieving a goal or set of goals. As a cognitive activity, it produces thought. Fourth, thinking about thinking. It is also called metacognition, which refers to the processes used to plan, monitor, and assess one's understanding and performance. For example, good readers use metacognition before reading when they clarify their purpose for reading and preview the text. Last, context learning. Based on a constructivist theory of teaching and learning, learning takes place when teachers are able to present information in a way that students are able to construct meaning based on their own experiences. Example, when you take advice from a friend but would not take the exact same advice if given by your mother. So this is an example of a situation in which the learning context matters greatly. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, let's proceed to the next one. Tuloy-tuloy na tayo until the last presenter.
Good morning, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes po, you are.
Uh, the topic that we will discuss is humanistic perspectives. So let me begin first in giving the definition of humanistic perspective. The humanistic perspective is a way of evaluating an individual as a whole rather than looking of them only through a smaller aspect of their person. It is a branch of psychology that relates to the idea of being entirely unique and your own individual. It looks at human behavior not only through the eyes of the observer but through the person doing the behaving. In humanistic perspective, it's so human being born as unique. Being unique is what makes an individual different than others. It is looking human as a whole rather than in smaller aspect of the person. It simply means that addressing the whole person. This includes a person's physical, emotional, mental, social, spiritual, and financial health. Addressing the whole person in mind, body, spirit can bring out the healthiest, happiest version of ourselves. Next, please. So the brief history. It was 1960s to 1970s when two major views of learning and development collided, the Freudian perspective and behavioral perspective. These two views weren't enough to answer how people learn, thus the third force, which is the humanistic perspective, came into picture. Humanistic perspective came to answer how people learn in the year 1960s to 1970s. As to perspective, the Freudian and behavior couldn't answer enough the question. Next, please. Assessing personality from a humanistic perspective. Humanistic psychologists evaluate your personality by looking at your self-concept. Self-concept, by the way, is how we perceive our behaviors, abilities, and unique characteristics. For example, beliefs that such as you are a good friend or a kind person are part of an overall self-concept. Our perception is important because it affects our motivations, attitude, and behaviors. Second is how you saw yourself and how you would personally answer the question, who am I? When your ideal self and your self-concept are alike, you are generally happy. So what is the difference between ideal self and self-concept? So ang ideal self is who someone you want to be, while self-concept is the characteristic and behavior you perceive and sees about yourself. If this two concept is alike, it is said that you are totally happy. Next, please. The basic assumption of humanistic psychology. Human have free will. We human being have capacity to make decisions and do action freely. Whatever we want to do, we can do this because we have capacity to do so. All individuals are unique and have an innate drive to achieve their maximum potential. A proper understanding of human behavior can only be achieved by studying human, not animals. Psychologists should study the individual case hagiographic rather than the average performance group or nomothetic. So every individual is unique. By assumption of humanistic psychology, it was said that every individual is unique, have different strengths and weaknesses that make differ to others. And I remember those sayings that even identical twins can have the exact same experiences, behavior. Don't remember that sayings even not even identical twins have the exact same experiences, behavior, attitude, and their brains are not wired the same way. Next. Cornerstone of humanistic approach learning. So, what is cornerstone? Cornerstone, to those who don't know, cornerstone is an important quality or feature on which a particular thing depends or is based. So the cornerstones of humanistic approach learning are spontaneity, importance of feelings and emotion, the right of individual to make their own choices, human creativity, like psychodynamic theory, humanistic perspective is largely a motivational theory. From a humanistic perspective, motivation is derived from each person's subjective feelings about self and desire to grow. Next. Transfer of learning is facilitated by three concepts: by curiosity, positive self-concept, open situations where people respect individually and promote freedom. Next. The proponent of humanistic theory. In year 1943, paper titled A Theory of Human Motivation, American psychologist Abraham Maslow theorized that human decision-making is undergirded by a hierarchy of psychological needs in his essential paper, and a subsequent 1954 book titled Motivation and Personality. Maslow proposed that five core needs from the basis of human behavioral motivation. Next, please. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory of motivation which states that five categories of human needs dictate an individual's behavior. Those needs are physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging needs, STEM needs, and self-actualization needs. Maslow theory presents his hierarchy of needs in a balik sa may. Theory presents his hierarchy of needs in a pyramid shape as what we have seen in picture, with basic needs that bottom of the pyramid and more high level and tangible needs at the top. A person can only move on the addressing the higher level needs when their basic needs are adequately fulfilled. The first of the eight-driven lower needs on Maslow hierarchy is the psychology needs. These most basic human survival needs include food and water, sufficient rest, clothing and shelter, overall health and production. Human Maslow state that these basic physiology needs must be addressed before human move to the next level of fulfillment. So the next level or the next among the lower level needs is the safety needs, include protection from violence and peace, emotional stability and well-being, health security, and financial security. Next to the needs is social needs on the third level of Maslow's hierarchy, relates to human interaction and are the last of called lower needs. Among these needs are friendships and family, both with biological family, such as parents, siblings, children, and chosen family, spouses, and partners. The higher needs, beginning with STEM, are ego-driven needs. The primary elements of STEM are self-respect, the belief that you are valuable and deserving of the dignity, and self-STEM. So the last into the hierarchy of Maslow is the self-actualization, which describes the fulfillment of your full potential as a person, sometimes called self-fulfillment needs. Self-actualization needs occupy the highest spot on Maslow's pyramid. Next. Key elements of humanist perspective emphasizes on functioning in the here and now, do not captive of the past. Emphasis on personal growth. Roger called this becoming a fully functioning, while Maslow referred to these ideas as self-actualization. So in humanist perspective, it's just focus on the present things and neglect the things happen in the past. It more focus on the personal development that relates to the process of becoming better in a personally meaningful way. So self-actualization, what it is. There is more to life than the absence of problem. The humanistic perspective maintains that we all have a driven towards self-actualization. To become that best we can become in the context of our life. You do need to receive the Nobel Prize. So the humanistic approach, next please. The humanistic approach in education will be discussed by Ms. Entrada.
Sige, imagine that, 5 minutes left na lang for Miss Entrada. Sige, let us do magic. We need that 5 minutes.
Good morning. Okay, ma'am. My topic is all about humanistic approach on education. There are five types of, there are five bases in humanistic approach, which is first one is choice and control. The humanistic approach, choice and control is the humanistic approach to place a great deal of emphasis on students' choice and control over the course of their education. The students' decision, the humanistic learning theory, and humanistic psychology both emphasize choice. Since humanistic learning is focused on the individual learner, students are argued to take charge of their education. They make decisions about everything from daily activity to long-term objectives. It is suggested for students to it is suggested it is suggested for students to it is suggested for students to dedicate some time to concentrating on a particular topic area of their interest. Human teachers feel that it is essential for students to be motivated and engaged in their studies, and it's more likely to happen when they choose to learn about something they are truly interested in, choice and control. The second one is felt concern. Felt concern is humanistic education tends to focus on the field concerns and interests of the student, entertaining with the intellect. It is believed that the overall mood and feeling of the student can either hinder or foster one the whole person. The whole person believes that the both feeling next is self-evaluation. Self-evaluation means that humanistic educators believe that that grades are irrelevant and that only self-evaluation is meaningful. Means humanistic educators disagree with routine testing because they teach students rote memorization as opposed to meaningful learning. Then, next please. Teachers as a facilitator. Next, please. Teacher as facilitator, the tutor, or next pamay. Hey, time. Facilitator, the tutor, or lecturer tends to be more supportive than critical, more understanding, the judgmental, more genuine than playing a role. Amo yan siya ang sa teacher as facilitator. And the last one is an environment. The environment in a school which focuses their practice on humanistic education tends to have very different setting than a traditional school. Environment consists of both indoor and outdoor environment, with a majority of time being spent outdoors. Next, Mai.
Sige, extend tayo a little bit, 5 minutes. We'll just finish this presentation of Ms. Entrada. 4 minutes to go. Masyadong Mahina siguro ang signal mo, Eva Marie, ano?
My,
Kasi sometimes you cannot be heard.
please.
Eva Marie, hindi ka maririnig. Can you hear Eva Marie o sa akin ito? Miss Entrada?
Murag choppy
I
siya,
think
ma'am.
my,
Murag choppy si Miss Entrada, ma'am.
okay. Oh, we are now in conflict ideas.
What happened to Miss Entrada, Christian?
Ni choppy siya, ma'am.
Oo nga. Ayan, nawala na siya eh. Nawala na si Miss Entrada. Sige na lang.
Ma'am, hinay ang signal sa ila, ma'am.
Mahina talaga. Oo, nakita. At least, no, she's trying her best naman. Nag-present siya, hindi nga lang siya nakapagpatuloy. But never mind, we're able to listen to her naman, no, a bit of her presentation. And I am just I'm thankful to this group of Miss Go, Aina, no, for Gleason is racing. Anong problema, Gleason? Mr. Lim?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, ang humanistic nga theory, ma'am, is sa next group na siya nga kuan, ma'am, nga topic.
B, may I check? May I check? Humanistic. Oo nga. Oo nga. Oo nga. Na ano na nila, nasama na nila. Anyway, siguro hiningi ng pagkakataon na yung signal niya ay mahina kaya hindi nakapagpatuloy. Oh, sige, thank you for that comment, Mr. Glenson. Thank you for that. Sige. So by next meeting, isama niyo na yung Maslow's humanistic perspective, no, in your presentation. Okay, so thank you for your time, guys. Thank you for your active participation. I hope others also would participate in the discussion. Kaya nga sabi ko, kailangan talaga mag face-to-face kasi we do not have the, the time, wala tayo talagang enough time to be able to discuss things talaga deeply, or thoroughly. We need talaga more time, for this. Imagine to discuss one theory and then pointing out its applications or classroom implications. Mahirap yan, no? We cannot really achieve that one in 2 hours, no, with the so many theories na to be covered actually in one session. But nevertheless, at least natapos din natin, and I hope you're guided naman, no, by the module. Doon na lang kayo magbabasa if you fail to catch up, no, everything that was presented during the presentation. Okay? Yes, Miss Fatima?
Can we take a picture before ka mag-leave sa meeting po?
Darling, you are so I cannot hear you. I mean, masyadong mahina yung yung
Take a
audio
picture
mo.
daw, ma'am.
Take a picture,
Mag-picture.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oo, why not? Sige.
Please turn on your camera, guys.
Sorry kasi Sige, open your cam. Matagal na ako hindi kapag-picture. And then please kindly kindly post your picture yung picture natin doon sa GC. Matagal na ako hindi nakapag-picture. Sandali i-ano ko muna yung ano. Wait a minute. Sorry. Ayaw eh. Ayaw eh. Ano na lang. Sige, go ahead. Ano na lang. Sige.
1, 2, 3, smile. Again. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for reminding me, Miss Fatima, ha? Minsan kasi
Yes,
nagmamadali si
thank
ako
you
eh. And then I
po.
guess you also